Welcome to my first installment of You Do What? I am here with Dr. Shanna Newton-Lavalle. Shanna, can you tell us a little bit about what your job is and what you do?
Yeah, so I'm currently a postdoc at the Salk Institute. And basically what a postdoc is, it's additional training after you get your doctorate degree. So I spent almost 7 years in graduate school, getting my PhD in biomedical sciences. I studied how the brain controls reproduction. And now I've started a postdoc position. Now that I have my doctorate degree, I'm still working in the lab of another professor, another PI, not private investigator, principal investigator of the lab. So the postdoc position, it's a little bit more independent than grad school. You have, you already have your doctorate degree, you've done your training, now you have a little bit more independence to do the work you want, learn new skills, and kind of use it as a stepping stone to get to the next stage of your career. So a lot of people do postdocs if they want to stay within academia and go into the professor route. That way they can get their own sort of area of expertise developed to start their own lab, get additional papers, funding, and just the recognition to get to that next step. I, on the other hand, don't want to go into academia, but it's still a very useful position for me. When I was looking into industry jobs post-grad school, I found that all the jobs I was qualified for sounded a little bit boring because I've been doing those things for several years, and I wanted to learn something new. And I was really interested in gene editing, CRISPR technology, and so I joined this lab so I can get additional training in areas that I wasn't exposed to before. And then I'll make my next step out of academia.
And so how did you learn about this job? Is this something that you've always wanted to do growing up, or is this something that you just discovered in undergrad?
Yeah, so I guess there's sort of two different aspects of this. So there's the aspect of becoming a scientist and then becoming a postdoc. I don't think anybody grows up like wishing to be a postdoc at any stage of their career. But being a scientist is really cool. When I was growing up, all through high school, lower sort of education, I didn't know that you could be a scientist. I didn't know that was a real job. I kind of just had in my mind, you read biology books, like they've already figured it out. I didn't realize people were actively figuring things out continuously, And it wasn't until I went into my undergrad, I had a biostatistics professor, Dr. Ashley Carter, that had this large scale experiment that he needed a lot of hands for. So he was talking about his experiment. It was, working with fruit flies at the time, and I was like, oh, that sounds interesting. So I decided to join the lab, had a lot of fun there, but even a year into that, I still hadn't realized that that's a job people do outside of, undergrad. I just kind of thought it was something you do while you're in school, and talking to my professor, Dr. Carter, I was telling him how I changed my major from film to engineering to bio. I wanted to be a dentist, and he was like, you get bored easy because I don't think you want to do any of those things. And that was the first time that science as a career really sparked my interest, because you can learn so many different things at any different level continuously. You'll never run out of things to learn about. And so that's what drew me into science to begin with, and that's why I went into grad school. In terms of being a postdoc, again, nobody dreams of being a postdoc, but it is a very useful stepping stone, depending on your goals. Some people, if they don't want to stay within academia, they don't want to run their own lab, sometimes you can go straight from graduate school to industry and, get a job straight in a company. But a lot of companies still look for this extra level of qualifications, which comes with having a postdoc. You just gain a little bit more confidence, a little bit more independence. You're basically doing your own thing with the feedback and the guidance of the PI of your lab. So I decided I wanted to do a postdoc as a stepping stone to gain more training in areas that I wasn't already trained in. And I've actually been having a great time since I've been here. Most people, I was trying to say most people, a lot of people find that their postdocs can be challenging. But I think as long as you're selective about where you do your postdoc and what you want to get out of it, it can be really rewarding and a lot of fun.
And can you tell me about your day-to-day? Like, what does it look like on a day-to-day, week-to-week basis?
Yeah, it looks different every day, every week, every month. It's different, and that's the fun part of it, right? I like doing science like at the bench. I'm working with cells. I'm working with live cells that require attention, and they need to be fed and cared for and passage, And so a lot of times that means I have to come on the weekends to take care of them. And the experiments that we do are sometimes you can do an experiment in a single day. Other times it takes 5 to 6 days to do it. And so again, sometimes you have to come in on the weekends to set things up in order to get anything done. So sometimes that can be tiring, especially if you're doing it weekend after weekend after weekend. There's never any pressure from my bosses to come on the weekends, but just if you want to get things done, sometimes you have to, if you're working with things that are alive, like cells. So there's that aspect of it. But also I have a research assistant that works for me, so I get to sort of teach the next generation of students how to become a scientist, teach them ways to think critically, ask questions, just anything that they need to improve on to reach their personal goals. That's what I love about my job. I love helping my students, get to that next stage of their career. And then there's also a lot of interaction with your lab mates. We have weekly lab meetings once a week where we all get together, somebody presents the research that they're working on so we could all give feedback, collaborate, come up with new ideas. Sometimes it's writing. So if I have a grant, then I'll spend, days just at the computer, reading, writing, rewriting, re-editing, scrapping things. So then there's that. Or if you're getting ready to publish a paper, you've already generated all of this data. Again, you're going to be at your computer a lot writing. So it really does change day to day, just depending on the needs of the experiment and then the stage of the project.
So one of the things that I think people kind of hear about but don't know about is trying to get your own funding. And anybody who's looking to come into being a scientist, what does that look like? How do you get your own funding?
It's hard. It's an uphill battle, always. So most of academic funding comes through grants. So either the PI of the lab, they're always writing grants to have funding for their entire lab, but then the individual members of the lab can also secure their own funding. They have grants for grad students, they have grants for postdocs, and then they also have transition grants for people that want to make that transition from postdoc to professor. So there's grants at all levels. They're all very competitive. You really have to have a really polished grant to have a chance at getting funded, but even with a top quality grant, it's kind of up to chance because you're also going in with a pool of a whole bunch of other academics that have also put in really great polished grants. And so at the end of the day, it's very subjective based off of your reviewers, their sort of interest, whether they had lunch before they read their grant or not, are they cranky that day? There's a lot of luck that kind of goes into it, but also a lot of effort. So I would say you just have to it's a numbers game. The more grants you apply for, the better your chances are at getting funding. And really it's just about learning how to sell yourself on paper. But yeah, so grants are hard, but that's how we get funded at all stages.
Sounds great. If somebody was looking into becoming a scientist, maybe they're looking at undergrad starting their PhD, are there any resources that people can do to talk to others who are in the industry now or who are getting their PhD or their postdoc?
Yeah. I don't know how many official resources there are. It probably depends on the university. If you're an undergraduate, most universities do some level of research. Different types of universities have different types of research, but I would start within your own university and just looking up labs that are currently doing research, find a lab that, that sounds interesting, and then talk to the PI, just schedule a quick meeting, which is really easy to do nowadays. Now that we have Zoom, you don't have to go in person. If you can, I think it's better. But you can hop on like a 15-minute Zoom call to just learn about the different research that's there, to understand if you would like that type of work. And then to understand if you'd like the day-to-day of actually becoming a grad student, going through that process, my advice would be to talk to other grad students. So if there's grad students in the labs that you're interested, talk to them there. If it's, for example, a state school, sometimes they only have like undergraduate and master's students. They don't have PhD students oftentimes. So then you're gonna have to look outside your university. But again, just finding people through LinkedIn is a big one. I've had many undergraduates reach out to me that I've never met before, asking, if I could hop on a call to talk about research and science and becoming a grad student. And people are more than happy to help. Some people are very busy, so if you don't get a response, no big deal. You didn't talk to them yet anyways. But not being afraid to reach out to people you don't know just to gain more information. People are more than happy to help. I'm always happy to help because I didn't know a lot of these things going in. And then same thing for the postdocs. Before I started applying to postdoc positions, there were some labs that I was interested in, and I talked to a couple people in those labs, and I decided, I was no longer interested in those labs. So I think the best way to get a better understanding is just making those informal connections, which can be intimidating, but you just gotta be brave and go for it.
Thank you. And then can you talk a little bit about what it's like to work here at the Salk Institute specifically?
Yeah, the Salk Institute is really, really amazing. Different than any lab that I've ever worked in. One, you have free parking. You don't have to pay for parking like you would at a university. And there's always space, no matter what time of day you get here. So that's one perk that do not underestimate.
I haven't had to deal with parking since I was in university, but no, yeah. Finding parking is always a challenge.
Yeah. So that's one of the perks of the Salk. But also just the magnificent architecture, Jonas Salk put so much into creating this, it's now a historical monument, and it's just bold and strong. So just being in the environment is sort of empowering. And then also you're just surrounded by amazing scientists, that do incredible research. And the cool thing about the Salk is there's no labels on any of the doors. There's no signs, because Jonas Salk's idea was that he wanted to facilitate collaboration. And so if you need to get somewhere and you don't know where it is, you have to stop and ask somebody, going through the hallways. So it does spark collaboration, and it's a smaller community, so you really get to know the other scientists and people that are working here. And not just scientists, all of the people that are working here. At any sort of position, and they have lots of events, they have festivals, so it really is a fun sort of collaborative environment being here at the Salk.
Thank you. And then before I let you go, if there was one piece of advice you could give somebody in trying to decide if they want to go into science or learn more about it, for people who are maybe still in high school, what piece of advice do you have for them?
I would say figure out what you enjoy doing, sort of what drives you, For me, I love figuring things out. I love puzzles.
Yes.
It's my thing. But yeah, so for me, I love science because I can figure things out consistently. There's always new challenges, there's always new problems, and that's the fun part of my job. For other people, some people just like knowing the answers to things. They love learning new things. That's another reason why you might like science. Other people want to do it so that they can help people. They want to be inventive, innovative, and take their creations to better society and better the health of individuals. So just understanding what drives you, I think, is the first step, and then seeing whether becoming a scientist sort of fits in with that. And then if you do choose to be a scientist, my next piece of advice is just to really trust what you bring to the table. You're going to be learning from people that are experts in many different fields, that have more training than you, have gone through the process already, but never sell yourself short. Just remember the value that you bring to each and every position that you have.
All right, thank you.